Let's get started. In the previous session, what we did, we covered the basics of redux-JS. I had created this directory, this project called redux-JS examples, and I had created different types of examples based on, different features of redux-JS observables, arrays, events, and observables from scratch. But now what we are going to do, we are going to use that in practice using our redux-observable middleware. The first thing that we need to do, let me close everything. For the main application that we are working on, and we have been working on throughout this whole series of React workshops, we've been this directory called user management app. I have created this directory just for this, just for these workshops, and it's really close to a real-world application. But the only point is that in a real-world applications, we usually have just one of these different types of middlewares. In this application, in one of our sessions, we used Saga middleware. Before that, we have been using Thunk, which is another kind of middleware, Redux middleware, allowing us to, helping us to communicate, to implement the Redux much easier. And the other, middleware that we can use is called redux-observable. I've put the link inside the description box, and also the description of the workshop. This is the URL of the website. So the only thing is that it's not just specific to React applications. In every single Redux-based application, you can use Redux-Observable. So, since this application, the application that we are using is based on React and Redux, we can use it. Is there any other way to use Redux? Yes, we can use Redux with Angular and a lot of other libraries. But in this workshop, we are going to be using that with our React Redux application. Okay, the first thing that we should do is this: copy this command, go to the directory of the application, as I said, user management app, and install the dependency. Other than that, we are going to be, using redux-JS as well. That's why we also need to install redux-JS. Okay, great. Now Redux-Observable has been installed, and the latest version of it, actually. So redux-JS 4, I have already installed this in our application. redux-JS 5, Redux is not being used. Yeah, this is the version of the redux-JS that we are using in this application. And so now what we could do, the first step to be able to use this Redux-Observable is to set up the middleware. I'm not sure if you have seen the previous sessions, or we have had several sessions about Redux middlewares. In this application, or in React Redux applications, we usually have some kind of module or a JavaScript file to configure our store. This is where I do this: configure store.js, and this is the function that configures my store. What I do here, I receive the initial state and some helpers configuration, which is going to be actually used with redux-thunk to create some helper functions. But if you don't use redux-thunk, you don't have to use that. So you just create helpers function is something that could help us with redux-thunk. You could see that here. So which means in your application, if you are going to just if you are going to use Redux-Observable as the main middleware, you don't actually need the second argument. So in this application, since we have already used redux-thunk, we have it as well. So this is the first step. We have to set up the middleware, the Redux-Observable middleware. Redux-Observable has a function called create epic middleware. There are a couple of new concepts that Redux-Observable offers, and epic is one of them. And I'm going to show you how this actually works. But this is something interesting because it's similar to redux-saga that had the term saga, and to be able to create a workflow of actions or workflow of dispatching actions. For instance, if you want to send a request to the server, get the response, and do something about it, then this could be called a workflow of actions. Why I say actions in plural? Because before you actually send a request, you want to dispatch an action which says, okay, I am about to send the request, so that you could just, if you want to show some kind of loader or spinner, that way inside your data in Redux structure, you're going to have that flag. And once you receive the request, you could respond. Once you receive the response of your Ajax request, you could again dispatch another action. Or if the Ajax request fails, you could dispatch another one. Let's see how redux-thunk, how we have done this using redux-thunk. One of the methods that we have, and is quite straightforward, is load users. And as its name suggests, what it does, it just loads the list of all users inside the database. So as you can see, this is the structure of action creators in redux-thunk. And what we do first here, we dispatch the get user list request, which means the request is about to be sent. At this line, we send the request and we wait using async await structure, the new syntax that we can use in JavaScript with Babel actually. You can pause the function and wait for a promise to be resolved. So at this point, this is what we are doing. We are using promise. So the reason that I had to brought up the term promise is because we are not going to use promise anymore, because RxJS has observables instead. So now we wait for the promise of the Ajax request to be resolved, and the value of that promise would be the list, the payload that we have received from that, the response. And after that, we are going to dispatch another action. This is the workflow of actions that we have for this specific feature, to load all the users. And if it fails, we have this try catch. If it fails, we're going to dispatch something like get users list failure. Let's see what happens inside that. Get user list request is just simply an object like this. And if you want to just make this a bit more clear, you could do this. The reason that we use these functions, because it is part of this, the practice that is being used in redux-thunk. So this is another thing, and another part of that. After receiving the response, this is what we are actually doing. We dispatch this action with this payload, and similar to that, this is what we do. Again, if you have seen the session about redux-sagas, you should remember that we implemented this same function using redux-sagas, and the way that it works, the way that it worked was, quite interesting, because instead of creating an action creator, which is the way that redux-thunk works, using redux-sagas, we could listen to an action. So this is actually the saga that we created in our session. So at this point, we created this function generator. You see the star sign here, which means this is a function generator. And we have this call again, another feature of redux-sagas that you could use to do the API call, and you could yield. So this is actually the main way to do this, is like this. This is the actual code. The other part was just to log the object. So this is actually how redux-sagas works. As you can see, it sends the request. Instead of await and instead of async await, what we have here, we have a function generator with yield, which means at this yield point, we pause again and wait for this ajax request to be, done. And once we receive the response, again, the promise would be resolved, and the value of that resolved promise would be this list. And just to make it a bit more, consistent, what I have done here is just to import the same function that we have been using inside the same action file here and use the same structure. So this is exactly the same, but now here again, instead of calling dispatch using redux-sagas, we should call puts, and we should yield on that, because puts, dispatching in redux-sagas are again another asynchronous operation. And again, if any error happens, we're gonna dispatch the failure. So as you can see, it's quite interesting the way that it works. So in redux-sagas, what we have the whole combination. As one function. In redux-thunk, right here, we have the whole workflow as one single function. And this is the function, the action creator here. And what we do, we dispatch that the request is about to send. We get the data and dispatch the data, or in case of error, we dispatch the error. In redux-sagas, we, using this technique, take latest, the action name, we could listen to a specific action. So, and the way that we have used it inside the component that we have is again another part of this interesting story. Let's see here. It should be inside this lists, users.js. There has to be a load users function. Yeah, right here. So using thunk, this is how we can call that function that we have created. So here, this load users function is actually this function that we have here. Again, a workflow of actions. But using redux-sagas, what we had done was just to dispatch an action instead of doing anything. So instead of calling any function, what we had done was just to dispatch an action. And So let's see how this actually works. This is the application that we have, and let's see if, as you can see, the list of all the users is here. And if I rename this function, you know, or comment out this one and rename this one to load users, again, this is going to be working the same as before. But this solution is based on redux-thunk, and this solution was based on redux-sagas. Let's again get back to our store configuration. Wow, Saga middleware has been commented out, and how it's working. It's working because I have created a Redux-Observable epic, which works exactly the same as Redux-saga in terms of the way that we can handle, you know, our actions. All we have to do is using Redux-Observable is just to dispatch an action, and inside the epic right here, you could, you know, in Redux-saga we had this term called take latest, and you could just put here the name of the action, and here you could do a similar thing. You could say, okay, action of type get users list request. Whenever this action, you know, has been dispatched, and I want to create this observable. Now let's just pause here before we go down this road and dig more into the structure of this code. Let's see how we have configured the Redux-Observable. As I said before, create epic middleware. Redux-Observable has this create epic middleware. Almost all of these Redux middlewares have this function. So for instance, Redux-saga has a one called create saga middleware. Redux-Observable has create epic middleware. And for redux-thunk, we have just thunk, and you could pass it as the middleware. Now, the second step is just to call this function. Again, you have to first create your epics. You could create different types of epics. The first, epic that you could find in the documentation of the Redux-Observable website is just a ping-pong action. Let me see if I can show you here. Yeah, right here. You can listen to a specific action. Let's say it is called ping. And what we have here is just a delay. Wait for 1 second. And after that, you could map that observable to another action. When you call map2, what happens is that this action is going to be dispatched. This is actually interesting because we don't have to call dispatch ourselves. What's going on here is that Redux-Observable takes care of dispatching the action for us. Well, all we have to do is just to create something, create a reducer for this ping-pong action. So for the ping, I have this is pinging true, and for the pong, I have this is pinging false, and that's it. So it's just the whole story, ping-pong, and nothing more. Let's see how it works. What I did to make it a bit more readable, I put that ping action in use inside the home page so that we could test it. Okay, let's see the way that I have used it. Okay, right here, action creators. I have passed the ping actions as the action creators so that I could and call the ping right here. So this ping action, let's see what we have here. It's just simple action. That's it. You could, instead of this, we could also do this props dot. Let me see if I have mapped the dispatch. Yeah, I have. So dispatch dot, we could just call the dispatch and say type. So this line number 21, is exactly, does exactly what we can see here in line number 22. So in a real world application, we don't usually create just ping-pong, scenarios. It's much more complicated than a ping-pong situation. So that's exactly what happens when you call this. So, and that's the whole story. The next step, this goes to the epic that we have created here inside this ping.js. We have a delay for 1 second, and after that we have this map to type pong, and which means after 1 second ping is going to be mapped to pong. In another term, after 1 second, the action of the type pong is going to be dispatched. And inside the reducer here, no, reducer, not router. Here, the flag is pinging and become false. Now, let's go to the home page. Okay. So the ping function, I created the ping function here. Let's see where I have used it. Okay, this button. It used to be like this. Go to list, go to the user list. Now it's called ping. And that's the whole story. We can, the rest could be tested in the console. Let me see if I can actually map the data as well. Yeah, is pinging is also here, but I'm not using it actually. How about we do this here? Live coding. Okay. Ping. So what we could do here, we could add a small if is pinging actually is inside the props, we should create the variable first and then use it here. If is pinging is true, let's just say pinging. And you could just again say pinged. And so if it is not pinging, you can say not pinging. Okay. Let's see now what happens. Let's go to the home page. It says not pinging, right? So let's just say, let's open this console. Based on the scenario that I just explained to you, once we click on this, the ping function is going to be called, and its pinging is going to be true for 1 second, and after that it becomes false again. Here we go. As you can see, pinging, not pinging. Let's see if we can change the value a bit, like from 1 second to 3 seconds. I think I didn't need to reload the page because of the hot reload feature. Anyway, here we go. Not pinging, 2, 3, back. For 3 seconds it was pinging. And this is the whole story. So this is actually how RxJS creates, could create an observable. So now let's just, again, this example doesn't seem to be a real world example. That's why I created another epic, and we have already seen its use case, load users. So instead of showing you the code, what I'm going to be doing here is just to copying the code from, let's just create this from users-epic.js. We are not going to actually use this code, but I'm going to be trying to write the code without. Okay, so the point about this is that first thing that we need to know is redux.js has a class called, has a type called observable, and observable has a function called ajax, which means we no longer have to use whatever we have been using so far to send our XHR requests. All we have to do is just to use observable.ajax, which creates an observable. And instead of type ping, now the constant that we are going to be, again, similar to the saga here, we're going to be listening to this action. So instead of ping, we should say pong. So again, instead of now we don't actually need to delay, add any kind of delay. What we can do instead is to switch map. This is actually the function name, switch map. So this, now here you could just have your action, and inside this we should return an observable. So this is the code. Now you could just take a look. You can see this. It's almost the same as the saga that we created before. So instead of just now what I'm gonna be trying to do is just to create this with the same functions that we have used for saga. So let's just copy this line of code here, and so we are going to have just one single source of action for the saga, for the epic, and for the redux-thunk. Again, in a real world application, we don't usually use all these three all together. What we usually do is just to use one of them. So here, let's just create the observable. If you remember, we had observable from events, observable from scratch. One of the other observables is we have to import the observable. An observable similar to from events, we also have something called ajax, which creates an observable. So if you just pass a string, a URL, it's going to be just send a GET request. Let's see what we have used for this model that we have for load users using redux-thunk. We have used this users API function get users, and inside that the URL address is this users API pad. So users API pad should be inside the guess one step above utils APIs slash conf dot. So here, yeah, this is a URL. Now we have the URL. Okay, observable.ajax. So what we could do here, we could do we could subscribe. But again, what we actually need to do is just to map this get user list request to another action. After it, once the response is back, we need that to be mapped automatically to another action. And the name of the action should be get user list success. So again, instead of doing this manually, what we could do, we could use, let's undo the code. We could just use this function that we have created before. But again, since I have written this code before with some small changes, you could see that here. You could map the code, or you could catch the error. So here to map, what it does, this map is something similar to MapReduce feature that we have with arrays, but this one is used for observables, not for arrays. You could map something like this action to another action. Payload. This is the data that we receive from, the Ajax request, and we want to map that to another action, and that action could be the function. The function of the action is just get user list success. You could just pass the payload. This one, the same error. Get user list failure. You could pass the error. I don't actually need this here. And let's see what we need. What I'm gonna be doing now here, let's just say ping epic users epic users epic. Let's just change this one and use the new epic that we have created instead of the code that I had written before. And yeah, this one. Okay, now what I'm going to be doing before we do this, let's just add a debugger here. Well, let's just add a console log here first. Response is ready, and payload. You could also add a debugger, which is going to be working just inside the browser, and now you could return the action. Okay, let's see now what happens. Okay, let's click on this users, go to the console, hard reload the page. Sorry, we changed this function inside the users page, and right now we are using redux-thunk. So yeah, this is what we are using right now. Let's just rename it back. Yeah, this is what we are gonna need now. Again, let's see. Webpack compiled successfully. list of all the users, console log load users is being console.log call or dispatch webpack building. We'll have to wait. Success. Server is running. Now if I reload, ignored. Get user list success. List is here. This is I guess based on the load users. I guess if we create a new one, here we go. Eventually. Okay, console response is back. This is just Ajax response. This is not actually the whole Ajax response is not actually the same as response. What we need is just to, okay, I've made a mistake here. Let's fix that mistake. Inside the users epic, we will receive the response, or the Ajax response. Let's name it the same. And Ajax response has an attribute called Ajax response, and this is actually the payload that we need. So let's just save this and let's go back to the code and let's see what we have. Payload dot response. Yes, that's right. Obviously we're gonna have this error. We'll have to create this user again, test user. Save. Okay, let's see what we have now. Response is ready. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I click, we will have all these 4 users, which means it is working. And the interesting part of this story is that right now we are using redux-thunk and redux-observable all together. In some use cases, for instance, when you create a new user and it's trying to reload the list of all the users, at that point what we do, we use redux-observable. But in other use cases, we are using redux-thunk. If you want to see what is that point that we do, okay, load user. This is the action, and this is the page. So what we do before the row page is rendered, the component is rendered inside the routes right here. We send a request, load users list, and this is exactly the point. At this point, what we do, we do this. We call get state. We get the list, and if the list is not already an array, we call get users. So this is another function which goes to this, which calls the same function, but it doesn't go inside that load users function. But again, it's not based on Redux observable. If you want to change this, what we could do, we could we could just comment this out out, and if we comment this out, this is not going to be an async function anymore. And inside the users.js, every React component has a lifecycle method called component will mount. Since we are using server-side rendering, component will mount. Since we are using server-side rendering, this component will mount is going to be called on both sides, server and the client. So what happens here is all we have to do is just to load the list of all the users is to dispatch an action props dot, or let's see, we have the load users function here. Yeah, right here. We could do this, or we could call this load users function. Load users. I'm not quite sure if it's gonna work, but it should be actually working the same as before. And it is working. Here we go. It works. So we have two different ways. Again, using the old way that I had implemented was the call, the ajax call, used to be sent inside the route before the component is rendered. Now the component is rendered, but inside the component will mount, when the component will mount is triggered, we dispatch an action called get user list request, and this is exactly where the ajax request is sent, and we are no longer using any other thing other than redux-observable. So redux-observable now is being used to load all the list of all the users, so which is exactly what we needed for this workshop. Okay, awesome. I'm not sure if I made my point or not, if the topic that I was trying to cover was clear enough or not, but I hope now you have a better understanding of the way that you can use Redux observable, and you can use actually React Redux along with your RxJS, along with RxJS, because RxJS allows us a lot of different features, not just dispatching the action the way that we have done here. So once you use RxJS this way, you could take advantage of that for all sorts of reasons and purposes inside your application, and it's going to be really useful and it's highly recommended. Okay, thank you for your time. Let's see if anyone has any questions.